So the next agency we will move along to is the Department of Homeland Security. That's still currently being led by Acting Secretary Rand Beers after Janet Napolitano stepped down, but we actually finally have a nominee for the Secretary, Jay Johnson. He's a former Pentagon official. Currently, Margie Graves is the acting CIO, and that's after Richard Spires had stepped down in May of this year. Many believe that the reason why Spires decided to or chose to leave was that there was a real struggle over the IT control within the department. Spires wanted to increasingly centralize IT management authority under the Headquarter Cio, but you've got a lot of the the smaller or their subcomponent departments under this. They really have a history of doing things their own way, and they didn't really want to relinquish that control. Speculation, and we will stress that this is speculation, is that Luke McCormick might move over from DOJ back over to DHS as the CIO here. So this has, DHS has the second largest IT budget of any civilian agency, and you'll notice that it spends actually over a third of it on the IT infrastructure. It is a pretty geographically distributed department. And continuing another trend that we saw with HHS, and we're actually going to see with pretty much all of the federal departments with a couple of exceptions, is that the share of that funding that's in development funding is actually decreased relative to the overall size of the budget. So on major federal-wide initiatives, DHS is very frequently the civilian agency that's the designated lead on cybersecurity and other homeland defense issues, but they also obviously get very involved in customs and copyright issues. Now, when it comes to IT insertion points, DHS has a ton, and you can really sell almost any type of solution into almost any of the components. So the CIO sits in the Directorate for Management, and we'll talk in a little bit more detail about the CIO shop on the next slide. Typically, each of the major components has its own CIO that has significant budgetary oversight and authority. And when approaching each agency, it's going to be important to keep in mind the unique mission needs that they all have. So if you're a cybersecurity vendor, your biggest customer here is likely to be the National Protection and Programs Directorate. And our July cybersecurity briefing actually covered them in depth. If you haven't seen that briefing, I'd encourage you to reach out to your account teams for further information on that front. CBP also has the largest IT budget within the department, and they're going to be primarily interested in technologies that will help secure the U.S. borders, particularly the southwest border. I'm sure we all remember SBInet. We're actually going to talk about a program that's a follow-on to SBInet in a couple of slides. So as Chris mentioned also when he discussed the digital government strategy back up at the beginning, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, they're really going to be looking for technologies, particularly mobile applications, that are going to help to notify citizens of oncoming disasters, as well as locate folks who maybe go missing in the aftermath. So an application that could say, I'm here, that can really tag in with other GIS and geospatial tools. The U.S. Coast Guard is going to be interested in ISR technologies as well as marine search and rescue. The Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, or FLETC, they do a lot of training of federal law enforcement officers. So learning management suites could be of really of good use here. Incidentally, the department did just move essentially most of its training platform for its employees onto the cloud as well. So that's now in a cloud environment. And one thing that I do want to note, TSA currently has an RFI out for IT Enterprise Infrastructure Support Services. The comment period actually closes in 2 days. It closes on Thursday, October 24th. So if you haven't seen that RFI and you're at all interested, or you can perform some of those services, definitely take a look out. Look at that. If you're having trouble finding it, either send us an email or get in touch with your account teams. We'll be more than happy to point you to the right place for that RFI. So I guess the overall message here is DHS is a big department, and you can sell just about any solution to just about any component here.
Now, we do want to briefly talk about the Headquarter Cio Organization at DHS, because although you're going to find most of your customers at the component level, so at CBP, ICE, TSA, and so on, departmental CIO does have a major role in setting policy that other DHS elements are really starting to follow here. And one of the major undertakings at this shop is DHS's pursuit of the information sharing environment. And that's basically the challenge of how best to manage and disseminate all of the data DHS collects with other elements of law enforcement and national security in the government. Donna Roy is the Executive Director of the Enterprise Data Management Office and also heads up the department's National Information Exchange Model, or NIEM. And she's looking at ways to leverage tools and technologies to improve operations across the department. And she's been known to say that DHS always seems to have more mission than they have people to actually execute that mission. I also quickly want to point out the Information Security Office here. That is distinct from the major cybersecurity programs that you've probably heard about in the news for DHS. It's really the group that takes care of internal DHS systems. Tom mentioned earlier it's NPPD that really owns the lion's share of protecting federal networks, and we're going to discuss one of their efforts in a little more detail in a few slides. Now here you can see DHS's top contractors and the top vehicles they use for purchasing. It reads a little bit like a who's who of major SIs, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the contractors and instead look a little bit more at the contracts. Now obviously for IT products vendors, the most interesting contracts here are GSA 70 and FirstSource 2, which is really just starting to get ramped up, so look for the portion of IT products purchased through that vehicle to increase moving forward. It's also worth noting that DHS does like to issue BPAs against Schedule 70, so that should continue to be a popular option for the department. The major purchasing here, though, is conducted through the Enterprise Acquisition Gateway for Leading Edge, or EAGLE, contract, and look at the spending to remain more or less at the level we're showing here. Now, most of that is systems development and engineering work, so the real opportunities for COTS vendors come from developing relationships with the EAGLE primes, which obviously is best practice for federal contracting anyway.
And because DHS has such a wide mission portfolio, we could spend a lot of time talking about the various facets of technology drivers, but I'd rather talk about maybe some of the trends that we're seeing within the department. One is that, similar to nearly everywhere else, we're seeing little cuts in IT budgets that are going towards consolidation and a move towards the enterprise licensing agreements. So we're seeing fewer individual but larger overall opportunities. Again, silver lining to that cloud. DHS subcomponents are also looking for more and more ways to automate their operations. They're also looking for more ways that they can develop web applications that can be of use to them and to push more of their systems off into the cloud to hopefully reduce infrastructure costs across the board. Now, as the newest of the cabinet-level agencies, DHS has actually seen its budget double over the past decade, and some of that has been wasteful and inefficient spending. So really, they're now making a concerted effort to address that bloat, and that's really going to be relying on business intelligence capabilities to help them identify a lot of those issues where they can sort of trim and cut and clip and tighten things up. You're going to really see the headquarters IT shop be the lead on this initiative. Now, onto the DHS programs. The first we're going to talk about is one I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the USCIS transformation effort. That's really the major effort to re-architect the USCIS business systems, particularly with a mind towards upgrading immigration documents. Now, transformation has actually seen its cost balloon well beyond initial estimates. And as a result, they've actually shifted and changed their development cycle. Instead of really a top-down, whole-scale systems engineering approach that actually went for a couple of years and only netted one usable web application, they're actually trying to switch to a more agile development model. And that model will ideally have 16-week development timeframes where they'll work to develop small portions of a system or update a new release throughout the course of that 16-week windows. Now, originally IBM was the prime, but as the result of the shift in the acquisition strategy here, they've really opened transformation up, and other vendors can actually compete for business and actually try and work on this effort for USCIS. Kathleen Stanley, she's the Chief of the Office of Transformation Coordination, and she'll be one of your key points of contact going forward to actually see how you could give USCIS a hand here.
The next program we're going to cover is CBP's Integrated Fixed Towers, or IFT. It's really an infrastructure investment that's mostly designed to replace the failed SBI Net program. Now, an RFP for this was released back in 2012. But CBP is only now in the midst of reviewing capabilities of the vendors who made it to production demonstration. Now, the reason why this program is of interest to most of you here today is not so much the towers themselves, which are obviously pretty substantial pieces of hardware, but the analytics and the data management tools that are going to be necessary for CBP employees to really understand the data that these towers are going to transmit. CBP is going to look towards mobile solutions so that border agents can make the most use of the data relayed by the towers in real time when they're deployed and traveling in the area. Now, beyond the need for tools that will help employees get a clear picture of what's happening out on the border, there are also going to be storage architectures built to accommodate the influx of new data from the towers. Now, Ken Marion at CBP's Office of Technology, Innovation, and Acquisition is going to be the key point of contact on the IFT program.
The last DHS program we'll talk about today is one that I'm sure is familiar to many of us here in the room. That's NPPD's Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program. Now, CDM has actually finally awarded 17 different vendors blanket purchase agreements on it was August 12th of this year, and that's to perform continuous monitoring as a service. Now, the CMAS BPAs give agencies the ability to utilize sort of the tools and technology that it's been developed by NPPD so that they can sort of tamp down their own costs and use the infrastructure that's already been developed and I don't want to say perfected, but really significantly better what NPPD has than what most of other federal agencies are currently deploying for network oversight. So this is again another example of shared services and strategic sourcing that we're seeing across the board. So here you can see the list of awarded vendors, and we actually have relationships with a lot of these vendors. We're actually working to actively ensure that our clients' programs are actually a part of the CMAS infrastructure. And Danny Toller and his boss, John Streufert, they had the Federal Network Resilience Group up at DHS, and they're primary points of contact for this effort.